Why didn't Socrates like French fries? Because they were made in ancient Greece. Another fantastic joke right before another fantastic lecture. Let's get started. Moving toward conflict. That's the topic for today. Going to have to deal with the start of the Vietnam War. So, what role did France play in Vietnam is the first concept of the day. How do containment and the domino theory relate to one another? Why is Ho Chi Minh an enemy of the United States and revered by so many in North and South Vietnam? How does President Kennedy's handling of Vietnam compare to President Johnson's handling of Vietnam? And why is the United States fighting and fully engaged in what becomes the Vietnam War? Key vocabulary for the day: domino theory, Gulf of Tonkin incident, and the Tonkin Gulf resolution. Of course, in domino theory, theory should be spelled with the E before the O. I apologize about that. The other two vocab words, we're going to talk specifically about those toward the end of the video. The United States is going to move toward participation in the Vietnam War, what becomes the Vietnam War. So how does that actually happen? And it really starts with France and in Vietnam. France, prior to World War II, had colonized Vietnam. Now, during World War II, we know that France fell to the German Empire. Japan is taking over a lot of land in different countries in East Asia, Vietnam being one of those countries. But World War II comes to an end. France has its independence. Japan has to withdraw from the amount of land that it has overtaken. And France wants to reestablish control over its colony, Vietnam. However, others have different ideas. And so enters Ho Chi Minh. I have up there the man because we can also, in the end, apply his name to a city, also a trail. But Ho Chi Minh, the actual individual, he has a chance to travel around, travel to different parts of the world. He gains a vast amount of knowledge and decides that he wants to create a free and independent Vietnam. The way he sees it, a communist government is what's best for Vietnam. And for France, this is a bad thing. It means that the French government in Vietnam is going to have to be overthrown. For the United States, this is also a negative thing. Why? This goes back to containment. If Ho Chi Minh establishes a communist government in Vietnam, that means communism was allowed to expand and containment in that part of the world failed. This is where we can enter the theory that President Eisenhower comes up with called the domino theory. You saw it in the beginning, but the idea here is if one country falls to communism, then another country falls to communism. Check out the picture at the top of the screen. You see China, a communist country, Korea, a communist country. Well, what if Vietnam falls to communism? Well, then its neighboring countries, Laos, Cambodia, they have the opportunity and likely will, this is the thinking at the time, likely will fall to communism. Then Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, all of a sudden, East Asia, Southeast Asia has all fallen toward communism. This would be viewed certainly as a very negative thing. And so let the fighting begin. France versus Vietnam, led by Ho Chi Minh, and one of the most significant battles early on is going to be fought at Dien Bien Phu. Okay, and this is a battle that the Vietnamese win. And this is a shock to France and the United States. And so enters the Geneva Accords. The Geneva Accords is an initial peace agreement that at the 17th parallel is going to divide Vietnam into North Vietnam and South Vietnam. If you think about that, there should be a historical ring to that. And that historical ring should take you back to Korea when it's divided at the 38th parallel into North and South Korea. Okay, back to Vietnam. It's divided into two because of the Geneva Peace Accords. However, this was not the goal of Ho Chi Minh, and therefore this will not be the end of his mission to unite and create a free and independent Vietnam. So now what does this mean for the United States and their involvement? The Geneva Accords happened in the 1950s. It's not going to be until 1961 that the troops are going to be sent over by the United States. That's 61. In 1963, the U.S. has built up its troop number to 16,000 approximately. But it's about to become much bigger. Let's find out how. This is where we're going to learn about the two vocab words that we saw at the beginning. Now, before we put everything on the screen here, I want you to first listen through it all and then come back to writing it down in your notes. Got it? Good. The Gulf of Tonkin incident is the first thing that we are going to address. Now, 1964. We have Lyndon B. Johnson as president. He took over for JFK after his assassination in '63. And when Johnson is president, on August 2nd, the USS Maddox is in the Gulf of Tonkin. This is not a surprise. As we mentioned, there are already troops in Vietnam, even though there's no war that's going on technically. Okay, and the destroyer is going to be shot at by the Vietnamese, and the Maddox is going to strike back. Okay, this is the first incident. And then 2 days later, supposedly, there's a second incident where there's once more another shooting reported, and the Maddox is going to fire back once more. But what's interesting about this second shooting is that last bullet point at the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. It says, later it was reported that there was no seeing or hearing of hostile gunfire, which means they were relying on radar, and weather does create problems with radar. And that's the first thing to keep in mind. However, in 1964, this was taken as fact that there were two separate incidents where the United States was attacked by northern Vietnamese boats. What it does is it leads to the Tonkin Gulf Resolution. Now there's a key part in the Tonkin Gulf Resolution, which we're going to see right here on the screen, and I have it listed there, is the Tonkin Gulf Resolution. It gives the president all necessary measures to repel any armed attack against the forces of the U.S. and the prevention of further aggression. This has now given the president power to send an army over to South Vietnam and fight a war which has not been declared by Congress, which the United States, that's how the United States is supposed to declare war. Congress has to declare it. Instead, they circumvent that rule. The president can take any measure he wants, anything that he sees fit, can allow him to send more troops over to Vietnam, and really this is going to be the beginning of what's called escalation. And we'll take a look at that in the next video. Peace.